With 2.8 being on its way, I think it's time to finally theorize about the potential events of the Sumeru Archon quest. Time to put on your tinfoil hats and let's talk about what will happen in Sumeru. Disclaimer, none of this is indicative of the final product, and these are all just personal speculation based on the information that we know from the game. Also, this video will not cover any leaks or the likes. In the Marvelous Merchant event, we get a hint of what's happening in Sumeru based on Libin's warnings. There's an ominous air hanging over Sumeru. I can feel it. To be honest, I've never been there, and I've got no clue what business I should do there either, but I do hope that the unrest in Sumeru will be swept away. Take it from me, don't go to Sumeru. It's a dangerous place. Or at least, it has been of late. So when we get to Sumeru, we can already expect that the nation is currently undergoing an internal crisis. Unlike the happenings of Inazuma, where the nation has already established its crisis a year prior to the events of the Archon quest, Sumeru's problems hold the recency of Rex Apis' death, meaning the traveler's initial presence will either escalate or remove the crisis altogether. He never specified what's really going on, but there's few things we know from the current story that could tie in well with this. First is the Archon quest trailer. Dainsleif mentions that the City of Freedom is plagued by a push for folly, tying into Lisa's own gripes with the scholars. She mentions an inhibited erudition, which means that whatever happened in Sumeru was done out of blind gluttony for knowledge. Second is the presence of the new Fatui harbingers that will be in Sumeru. The Fatui already have underground bases that have experimented and kidnapped people, and the ones we know of are under Dotoria's division. Amplify this scene with Kunikosushi's disappearance and the motif of gluttony, and we have a group of people that can be easily manipulated to do the Fatui's bidding in the name of science. The third is the possible corruption of the higher-ups. We hear that despite knowing of the folly in Sumeru, the god of wisdom feigns ignorance and takes no action. Kusanali's lack of action will be what the traveler must remedy, given that this is an Archon quest. But those are just summaries of all the ideas that I have of what will happen in Sumeru. Let's actually dive into specifics and semantics. Lisa and Amber's role in Sumeru will act as a precursor to the story, similar to how Beta was a crucial means of transportation. At the moment, the traveler has no sure way of entering Sumeru. The academia is most likely limited to simply those that study there. The academia is the largest resource the traveler has if they want to learn more about Teyvat and its history. The goal of the traveler's journey is information and finding the truth of the world, and I doubt they would pass up the opportunity to learn more from the academia. So currently, the best possible people to approach are Lisa and Amber. Lisa is a known alumnus of the academia and still retains connections with her teacher. This is evidenced in the manga when we see Sino. Since Sino is a playable character that appears relatively early in the series, given how he's the featured character in the trailer, it's possible we meet him as our guide like how Thoma was our guide. Collei was a girl featured in the manga that befriended Amber, and Collei most likely has a pivotal role in unmasking the true atrocities of Sumeru due to her past. Collei has experience with the shadier experiments that Sumerian scholars have committed, and she is priceless information if the traveler needs to face an underground threat. Lisa and Amber are our strongest connections with Sino and Collei at the moment, so let's see if they do anything about that. Moving on, other characters don't really have an immediate connection with Sumeru that the traveler can directly use, but it's still worth noting. For example, Diluc's underground network is too vague for us to make any conclusive decisions, or Venti's status as an Archon as a connection with Kusanali. Venti never used his Archon status before to help the traveler meet A, so it's hard to determine if he'll help this time. So for now, our safest bet are Lisa and Amber. We never get real confirmation on what Sumeru is based off of, but given the soundtrack and the clothing, it's most likely based on South Asia and North Africa. Nations like Egypt, India, or old cultures like Persian mythology may be inspirations. There's a mention of the word Div in the manga that might refer to a wicked and demonic supernatural creature of Persian mythology. In the trailer, we get the term pages of Purusha, which reference Hindu mythology. By extension, I think we'll get something akin to the Vedas when talking about Sumerian mythologies, much like the Yakshas or the Fae in Mondstadt. A Veda is a collection of poems or hymns composed in archaic Sanskrit by Indo-European speaking people who lived in northwest India during the 2nd millennium BCE. According to the lore, Sumeru has both rainforests and deserts, meaning unlike Liyue and Mondstadt where we're mostly subjected to one kind of climate besides Dragonspine, Sumeru's location might have a proportional distinction between their two biomes. In the manga, we saw some buildings that we can relate to the traditional Arabic architecture. These resemble the mashrabiyya, patterned wooden lattices that protrude outside the main building. As for the research unit that we see, they resemble large fortresses with small, closely spaced windows. You also see the layered architecture of the buildings, and its close resemblance to a castle. In real life, there are a lot of historical forts in India. Incorporating the archaic feeling of lost wisdom and knowledge through massive historical forts would be a great way to establish not only the prestige, but also the history of the Sumeru academia. Though, I would absolutely love to see something akin to the Great Alexandria Library in Sumeru, though the odds of that might be a little low. It's almost impossible to open the discussion of the Archon quest without mentioning the harbingers. Much like how Senora and Tartaglia were featured in Liyue and Inazuma, Scaramouche not being featured in Sumeru would be a strange deviation from that trend for the sole reason of his backstory. Kunikusushi's tale opens the possibility of the next Fatui harbingers for the sole reason they're either pursuing the electronosis that is currently with him, or they're trying to subjugate him for his alleged betrayal of the Fatui. But what I'm guessing is about to happen next is Kunikusushi's pursuit of Il Dottore for unknown reasons. Il Dottore is a harbinger reference in the Pale Flame set and the featured harbinger of the manga. We know that he's a scientist that pursues knowledge without moral constraint, such as experimenting on young children or allowing his divisions to conduct human testing a la Aperture Science style. But the reason I hope he's connected with Kuni's tale is because of the parallels between Kunikusushi and Dottore's backstory. Dottore always believed that humans are simply machines that require fine-tuning. He can manufacture something stronger than God. He believes that vision wielders, those given power for no apparent reason, are self-inflated fools. His whole motif is creation and bastardization of life, reaching beyond moral capacities by introducing artificiality into human existence. While it was never mentioned if he was the one that tinkered with Kunikusushi, it's possible that Kunikusushi was his magnum opus, the realization of his goals of tampering with something beyond humanity, or at least studying something that's beyond human. And in contrast, maybe Kuni will look for Il Dottore for his own personal reasons, either to use the Gnosis with the bartering claim that if he helps Kuni, Dottore gets to study a Gnosis up close and personal, or by threatening the scientist to replace the delusion in his body with the Gnosis. Whether Dottore helps him though, or simply just factory resets him, is up for the plot to decide. Or more probably, Dottore is simply amongst the harbingers that look for Scaramouche and Sumeru. Maybe there are a lot more. I mean, maybe a new female harbinger? Please? The last one kinda disappeared from the map. Now it's time to gloss over the potential problems that we will have to face in Sumeru. One of them is the human experimentation. If you've ever read the manga, you would know what I'm talking about. The Fatui had an underground division in Sumeru that dealt with experimenting on children by injecting them with Archon residue, the same material found in delusions. This is what happened with Collei and why she had elemental powers. Given that we were just introduced to the idea of the black market and delusions in Inazuma, Sumeru is the perfect place to expand on that plotline, by instead showing us that some people are willing to go through hell and back just for knowledge. Inazuma never really gave the spotlight to that plot given we immediately abolished it without reparation, but a deeper understanding of human desperation or even anger towards gods could show us the disgusting aspect of human curiosity, which is something a nation called the Nation of Wisdom should tackle upon. Barnabas was the one dealing with the division in Sumeru, but we're actually not sure if this division was abolished given that Barnabas was defeated in the manga. A year would be such a long time to really determine if they kept their underground facilities and the people inside those funny farms. But we do know that while the Foundation may have been destroyed, the Fatui were still curious about the fruits of that endeavor. Real question is, would Dottore revive that project? Honestly, I would say he would. A land of wisdom where anyone is willing to do anything for knowledge, to the point that experimenting on either themselves or other humans is plausible. This is the perfect folly to open the eyes of the Archon. In the event that she cares, that is. Now back to forbidden knowledge. The reason I opened the possibility of human experimentation is because of Sumeru's mysterious mercenary force. There is a faction known as the Eremite, a group of mercenaries that are described by the NPCs as true soldiers of fortune that will do anything for money. But the most peculiar thing about them is that some members wield bizarre yet formidable powers. The word Eremite means a religious recluse, something like Saint Benedict if you know his story. The truth of this faction is still unknown, and we have little to no information about what they can or can't do. But I wouldn't doubt that if a mysterious group of people are operating throughout Devat, they would have had the help of artificial visions. Elemental magic in this world would not be enough to be considered bizarre, but a delusion on the other hand is versatile that no one would know what they are. Elemental magic is relatively common in this world, but we never truly got a description of what makes the Eremite so different. Are the Eremite just a group of mercenaries that were once affiliated with the Fatui? Are they part of the human experiments, or did they willingly ask for power? Honestly, I'm hoping that they are escaped human experiments that instead used their power for mercenary work. Unlike Collei that actively looked for a way out, these people used it as a means of money. Or perhaps they're not even affiliated with the Fatui. Maybe these bizarre powers are self-imposed and created as a way to represent human curiosity and gluttony for power. Regardless, if we ever meet the Eremite, this might be a long conversation. Now we deal with the Archon herself, Kusanali. Now for my personal theories and speculation of her. I don't think there's a hidden god besides her for the sole reason of potential mistranslation or misinterpretation of the translation itself. The title Lesser Lord Kusanali would suggest there's a greater god that is currently ruling alongside her, but the problem is that other translations point to the word not being lesser, but instead little. Yai even said that this is a term of endearment, so it's possible that this title isn't for her status as a lord, but instead as a short god and a gremlin, being a child and all. Besides, if Kusanali's divinity is recognized as being an Archon, but is still called the Lesser Lord by the people, then there's a weird contradiction. Firstly, if there is a Great Lord, does that mean that the people are aware of this Great Lord as being something higher than an Archon? From all the places that we have right now, there is no reason for an Archon to be considered as a lower lord. Conversely, if the people are aware that Kusanali isn't the true Dendro Archon because of her status as a Lesser Lord, then why would Yaimiko and Ganyu refer to Kusanali as a Dendro Archon in the first place instead of referring the traveler to the Greater Lords directly? I mean, it's common knowledge that she's known as the Lesser Lord, so why not give the traveler the heads up that hey, there's a Greater Lord that exists somewhere. You might want to find them instead of Kusanali. And why would people even consider having a Lesser Lord to begin with? Why not just call the real Dendro Archon as Lord while Kusanali gets a similar respect as an Adepti? When we mention the Anemo Archon, for example, we don't talk about the role of the God of Time as a secondary ruler of Mondstadt. We directly talk about Barbados. The God of Time was never referred to as an Archon. But I don't think that the Kusanali isn't the Dendro Archon theory is baseless for the sole reason of the Cataclysm. Our only source of this is Ganyu, but Kusanali has been a Dendro Archon for 500 years and was born 500 years ago. This means that the Dendro Archon became who she is from conception. Given that the original Dendro Archon, the God of Woods, died in the war, my guess is that the God of Wisdom was a contingency. If you've ever played Dungeons & Dragons, you would know that a contingency spell only procs when a specific condition happens. It has to be a specific set of rules, and here, I would say that it was the permanent death of the Dendro Archon, much like Makoto and A. It would honestly be a bad idea to leave a nation without a contingency, especially during a time of turmoil like the Cataclysm. Zhongli is able to retire in peace given that Liyue was in a time of harmony. But in the position of the God of the Woods, it would be crucial to give the power of the Dendro Archon to someone else before leaving, for the sole reason of succession. Honestly, it would be pretty symbolic if this is how the God of Wisdom was created. She is known as the God of Wisdom, because the initial Dendro Archon had the foresight to create or pass on the power to her before their imminent death. But in the event that I'm wrong and there is a shadow god puppeteering everything, then we will see what happens. If Kusanali truly is an inferior god to another entity altogether, this sets the tone for future Archon relationships and the true weight of being an Archon. If there is a hidden god somewhere, then I wonder what their dynamic with Kusanali is. Sumeru is the midpoint of the story and is in the perfect place to give us a lot of exposition. The story has been set and the stakes are slowly increasing. Sumeru is the direct midpoint that we need to open future world building, honestly, so I really hope we get more information about the Abyss, about the old civilization, and about Celestia altogether. But yes, that's it for me. If you have any comments or theories about Sumeru, feel free to write them below. Anyway, my name is Aster and thank you for chilling with me.